Hey, listeners, it's Kara, your host. After 176 amazing episodes and hundreds of book recommendations, I wanted to make it a little bit easier for you to find your next great read. The Bookish Lights Roadmap is your guide to all 175 podcast episodes, sorted by genre so you can quickly find the stories that fit your reading mood. From picture books to adult novels and everything in between, it's the perfect way to explore past episodes and discover new favorites. You can find your copy of the Bookish Lights Roadmap at www.bookishlights.com/read/roadmap, or just click the link in the show notes. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights, a podcast where we tell our stories through our favorite books. Each episode features a bookish guest where we will talk about reading, life, and the seasons we're in, all through a thoughtfully paired book flight of recommendations for you. If you're looking for meaningful book recommendations and a space to slow down, you're in the right place. In today's episode, I am chatting with internationally best-selling author Natasha Lester. She is the author of 9 novels translated into more than 20 languages, including fan favorites like The Paris Seamstress. Before becoming a full-time writer, Natasha worked as a marketing manager for Maybelline Cosmetics. In this episode, we're discussing her newest novel, The Chateau on Sunset, a reimagining of Jane Eyre set against the dazzling and shadowy backdrop of Hollywood's Chateau Marmont. Welcome to the show, Natasha.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I have a moment. I'm like, in my mind, this is how I pronounced the chateau. Did I say that right?
Perfectly. Yes, you
Okay.
did.
I'm like, how sometimes when you read things in books and then you're worried about, is that how you say that word?
Absolutely. Or you hear somebody else say it and you think, that wasn't how it was in my head.
Yes. And I'm like, well, you as the author would probably be able to tell me if I said that right.
Yeah.
So, well, I feel like we are so much more than this very brief introduction and bios that we have about ourselves. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So I live in a town called Perth in Australia. As you can probably tell by the accent, I have 3 kids. 2 of them are now at university and they're in Sydney, so on the other side of the country. So I travel back and forth a lot to see them. My son still lives at home with me. I live very close to the beach. I go swimming most days because I love going into the water, although it's coming into our winter, so it's starting to get a little bit chilly. I love to read. I love to collect vintage fashion. I do a little bit of fashion illustration, and I'm always trying to learn something new. Last year, my daughter taught me to knit, which was
Okay.
actually very meditative. And I've just been in Paris, and in Paris, I was convinced to buy a needlepoint kit. And so this year, my new thing is going to be needlepoint, I think.
We lived in Washington State for 1 year. My husband is in the military, so we move quite
Okay.
frequently.
Yes.
And I got into cross stitch because a neighbor of
Oh,
mine did
okay.
it. And we had young babies in the house. And so our nights were wet and early. And so I was like, I need a hobby. And so I took up cross stitch for the year and I bought 3 patterns, not realizing how long they actually take to complete. And I think I did finish one project and gave it to my grandmother, but just recently I did the buy nothing page and I gifted the 2 other away because now that we live in San Diego, my kids are getting older and they're involved more. It's my free time has dwindled even less, even less
No
at this
time to
point.
cross stitch. Well, I deliberately bought the smallest one I could find, and the lady assured me it was easy. So fingers crossed she wasn't lying.
Yeah. That's probably what I should have done. I bought this big one. I thought, oh, I'll do this for my daughter's wall. And then
Yeah,
I
easy.
never, it would take me 2 years to finish probably. So, well, can you swim year round where you live?
Look, it does get cool in
Okay.
July, August here. My goal is to try to swim every day, but I don't know. I haven't done that before. We've only just moved close to the beach. So, yes, I've set this new ambitious goal. So we'll see how I go.
Yeah. Here in San Diego, the water is very chilly. So
Yeah, okay.
there might be people that do that, but that is not for me. I'm like, give me a warm summer day and sure, I'll get in.
Yeah,
But
yep.
maybe one day. Well, for listeners that maybe haven't had a chance to pick up the Chateau on Sunset yet, why don't we tell them a little bit about it?
Of course. So it is a reimagining of Jane Eyre set in Hollywood's infamous Chateau Marmont Hotel during the 1950s and the 1960s. It begins with newly orphaned Aria arriving at the hotel as a not quite 14-year-old girl. She's kind of abandoned in the hotel like a piece of junk mail, waiting for her aunt who lives at the hotel to come and claim her. Instead, she meets two aspiring starlets named Calliope and Flitter, and they induct her into the ways of life at the Chateau Marmont. And then we follow her over the course of about 7 or 8 years as she grows to be a young woman when the hotel is bought by a rock star named Theo Winchester, who kind of turns Aria's life upside down.
Yeah. I absolutely loved this book. I took it to the
Thank
pool
you.
with me. And speaking of swimming, I took it to the pool with my kids one
Yeah.
day to start it. And I was like, this feels like the perfect summer read, even though it's got the gothic vibes to it. Just that diving into old Hollywood was so fun.
Absolutely. And I feel like because so much of the action at the book is set around the Chateau Marmont's swimming pool, it is
Yeah.
absolutely the perfect summer read.
Yeah, so I here am making campaign for the USA readers that you should be picking this up for your summer beach read. You will not regret it. Who was your favorite character to write in this novel?
Oh, that's such a good question. Aria, I feel like, is the most like me in many ways. So, in some ways, she's my favorite. So, she's kind of the equivalent of the Jane Eyre character, if you are familiar with some of the undertones of that story in the book. And the reason why I think she's like me and perhaps why I love her so much is because she reminds me as a not quite 14-year-old, which is how old she is when she starts the book. And I was quite academically gifted, and I used to get the top marks in all of my classes. And back when I was a 14-year-old, being intelligent and getting the top marks was not something that was valued. In fact, in Australia, I'm not sure what word you guys would have used in America, you were called the square or the
Oh yeah,
nerd, and that was
same
me
here.
throughout high school. Yeah, okay. Some words are internationally translatable, aren't
Yeah.
they? And I remember vividly actually trying on a couple of tests to get a couple of questions wrong so that my mark wouldn't be quite as high and would sort of fit in more with the rest of the marks in my class. And on reflection, I look back and think, wow, what kind of world do we grow up in where we try to be less smart than we really are? And we think that that's a genuinely valid way to get ahead in life.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, Aria is a bit like that. She's moved to this environment that's very unfamiliar to her, and she believes that the best way to get ahead is to be invisible and to try to keep herself as small as possible. And I feel like most people can relate to that.
Yeah.
I feel like it might not be in high school, but it might be at another time in any of the listeners' lives that perhaps there's been a moment where they have felt that in order to get along, to get by, they have made themselves less than they really are. And so that's what I'm trying to channel in Aria. And in the course of the story, to say, okay, what does it take for this person who believes that being smaller than, less than, being quiet and invisible is the right way to go? What does it take for her to go, no, enough is enough? Now is the time where I need to finally stand up and find my voice and proclaim that to everybody. So that's why I really love Aria.
Yeah. I think that as I reflect back on the different decades of my life and what I learned, and you think about, oh, I never wanted to leave my 20s. They were so fun. But I was not nearly as confident to not diminish
Yes,
myself as I am
yes,
today. And I think that, I don't know if it's just age or I love that you explored that idea of when is it okay to not diminish your sparkle and who you
yeah.
are and be you.
Yes, absolutely. I do think that it is something that you become better at with age.
Yeah.
But my hope is that maybe people, upon reading the book, no matter what age they are, will think, okay, it's okay to be me however I am in any situation. I don't have to change myself to suit my surroundings. Be proud of who you are.
Yeah. And one thing I love about reading is when you see the character find their group of people that they can be
Yes.
that to, that found family. That is my
Yes.
go-to little. I've had an author call it catnip. I'm like, that is my catnip of books too. Like just
Absolutely.
where,
Yes.
you know, they finally can be themselves and truly shine. I think that's important. So, when you started writing this book, were you doing a bunch of research as well into that time period and all of that?
I was doing a little bit. I tend to save a lot of my research until I finished a first draft.
Okay.
I'm not the kind of writer who is able to plan a lot up front. I always say my creativity thrives in chaos, and it doesn't like for me to sit down and have a plan and an outline. I have to sit down and let the story unfold page by page
Okay.
for me as a writer, the same way it does for a reader. So when that's the way you write your book, it's really hard to do a lot of research up front
Yeah.
because you don't know what your research scope is. So that's why I tend to do a lot of that after I have that first draft, because then I know this is the shape of the story, these are the characters, and these are now the gaps that I need to fill. One of the things that I did after that first draft was I actually went and stayed at the Chateau Marmont because they must be the only place in the world that has a no photographs allowed policy. They've always had that policy and they
Okay.
still have it to this day. I actually saw them enforcing it while I was in the lobby when a guest
Wow.
came out to take a photograph of the merchandise cabinet in the lobby, which just has some Chateau Marmont t shirts in it. And that was all she was photographing, not any celebrities or anything like that. And
Yeah.
a staff member came out and asked her to put her phone away and not take any photographs. So, yeah, it's
Wow.
really an unusual experience to have nobody taking selfies and doing photos. It's actually quite refreshing. But it means that if you're writing a book set at the Chateau Marmont, you can't just go online and Google photographs of
Yeah.
what the pool area looks like or what the gardens look like or where the main building is in relation to the bungalows. You really have to go there to find out those things. So, yes, I do suffer for my art. I did make myself go and stay there for a couple of, for a week or so. And it was fabulous. It is such a storied hotel. Almost every Hollywood celebrity you've ever heard of has lived there at some point throughout history. And even now,
Wow.
plenty of stars still live and stay there. So it's really a fun experience. And so it meant taking lots of handwritten notes rather than taking photographs to refer back to later so that I could bring the chateau to life as fully as possible in the book.
Yeah. Did you mention to them you were writing this book at all?
Well, I didn't because the no photographs allowed
Yeah.
policy. I was a little bit worried how they might take the fact that a person was writing an entire book about the hotel. So
Yeah.
I kept that very quiet and I just went very low key and incognito.
Yeah. Well, what was your first spark or idea for the story? Was it the chateau or was it Jane Eyre or Aria, like you mentioned? What inspired it?
I always say that my book ideas tend to come out of two seemingly disconnected ideas suddenly coming together in my head and realizing that I could put those two things together and make a book out of it. And in this case, it was I had come across an article on the internet about the Chateau Marmont, which I'd always known about, but I hadn't quite realized the extent of how many celebrities had lived there
Yeah.
over its history and also the kinds of fun, crazy things they got up to when they lived there. And that's what this article was about. And talking about, catnip for an author, there was one line in this article, and it was a quote from 1930s Columbia Pictures studio president Harry Cohen. And he said about the Chateau Marmont, if you must get into trouble, do it at the Chateau Marmont. And of course, a novelist's imagination immediately fires, thinking, what kind of trouble could
Yeah.
I get my characters into if I was to situate a story there? So that was the first thing that came to me. But at that time, all that it was a setting in search of a story. I didn't have a story that I felt that I could place in this setting.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was actually in the process of brainstorming. I needed to come up with an idea for my next book, and I'd waited until I was in a very inspirational place on a train, in fact, going from Venice to Florence in Italy. Because I figured that if I couldn't be inspired by the Tuscan countryside, then I couldn't call myself a writer. So I was there on this train trying to come up with my next book idea, and I was actually drawing a blank. So I began thinking about books that I had read recently that I had loved, and a couple of those were reimaginings of classics
Okay.
like Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead and Anne
Yeah.
Napolitano's Hello Beautiful. So,
Yes.
and that as soon as I thought of those, I thought, wow, what if I did that with my favorite book, classic novel, which is Jane Eyre? And the minute I had that thought, I could straight away see, instead of Rochester's Gothic Thornfield Hall from the classic novel, the very Gothic Chateau Marmont as being the perfect place to do a reimagining of Jane Eyre. So suddenly those two things collided in my head and I had my book idea.
Oh, that is so fun. I'm imagining it's like, boom, okay, I'm ready.
Yep, that's right. And
Yeah.
then, of course, the trouble is you have to sit down and write it.
Yes, exactly. Which is not an easy feat, but
No, it's much more fun when it's just an idea.
yes. Oh, that I love the whole story behind that. I really felt when I was reading this that the chateau it was a character in itself. Like you did such a good job writing
Yeah.
it. I felt like it was its own character within the novel.
Yeah, well, when I stayed there, I really could feel the history bleeding from the walls. And it just made me think, imagine if it was a place that could tell some of its history in some way. And
Yeah.
so, from that experience of being there, that's why I really love to visit the places that my books are set in, because that's how you get these seemingly crazy ideas. And I feel like it just helps to bring it to life so much more in the book.
Yeah, a much fuller picture, I think, that way.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself through writing this novel?
I learned that I am unable to write a book without having a very strong kind of feminist theme running through it. So I didn't really understand that that's what I was going to be doing when I set out to write this book, even though. Everybody says Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre is the first feminist novel. So that should have given me a bit of a clue. But I don't know, when I
Yeah.
began writing, it was, this story of this orphan at this Hollywood hotel. And it wasn't until I began to do quite a lot of digging into the women of the golden age of Hollywood over the 1950s and the 1960s, whose stories I'm writing about in the novel, that I began to realize what they went through on a daily basis to deliver us these beautiful movies, these
Yeah.
movies that have given us hopes and dreams and fantasies and aspirations. And what we see is the gloss, and we think we know these women because we've seen them on screen. But actually, their stories of their daily lives are mostly unknown to all of us. And in uncovering those stories, I realized that a lot of what happened to the women who lived at the Chateau Marmont at that time was the genesis of what we discovered during the Me Too movement. And I couldn't let that go, and I couldn't not write those things into the story and try to just bring those women back to people's notice, to say there's a whole another side to these women, and we shouldn't let history write that side of them out of the pages of the history books in the way that I think maybe it has been. So, yes, so I did learn that, as in my previous novels, this kind of recurring theme of women in history and their struggles and acknowledging how important feminism is just something I always keep returning to, even if I don't realize it when I first begin writing a novel.
Yeah, it lended to like the haunting piece, the gothic piece of the novel, right?
Mm,
Of just what they were going through. Like, I think we all kind of know that, but like you said, that's not what you see on the glossy screen. And it's just, but it's that hauntingness of what they had to go through to get there. And it just added to the book in that way.
y- Yeah, I think you're right. I think particularly the story about Natalie Wood and what happened to her when she was filming Rebel Without a Cause, which was largely conceived of, scripted, auditioned for, cast, rehearsed in Bungalow Number Five of the Chateau Marmont. Um, that those kinds of stories, which again, Natalie's beautiful in Rebel Without a Cause, and we know she had a bit of a troubled life, but not everybody realizes that the director of the movie, Nicholas Ray, was 43 years old when Natalie was cast in that movie. And if you read a non-fiction book about the Marmont, it will talk about the sexual relationship that Nicholas Ray had with Natalie Wood. But they often miss the fact that Natalie Wood was 16 years old at the time. And to me,
Yeah.
that's not a sexual relationship. That's a classic example of a man in a position of power taking advantage of a girl. And I just wanted to reframe that and say, okay, sometimes we call these things by names that make them seem acceptable, but maybe
Yeah.
there's a little bit more to it than that.
Exactly. Like if we really looked at that, that's possibly,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, what is your wish for readers? What do you hope they'll take away when they pick up the Chateau on Sunset?
I hope that what they'll take away is the idea that, like Aria, who has lots of hopes and dreams for her future, but she gets a bit stuck and just has the hopes and dreams, and she doesn't take that step of action to do something about that. And we should all have hopes and dreams. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. Hopes and dreams are amazing and they help fuel us through life. But we need to remember that to make those hopes and dreams come true, we have to take that first step of action. And so, like Aria finally does in the book, I hope that readers reflect on, okay, this is my deepest wish. What could I do tomorrow or next week or next month to take that first step to making that come true? That's what I hope they take out of the book.
I love that. I love that so much because, yeah, you're right. We have to have the action with it as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. How, in your busyness, do
Okay.
you find time to read?
I mostly read in the evenings. During the day, I'm usually reading non-fiction research books that relate to whatever I happen to be writing at the time. So I save my fiction for the evening. I always make sure I go to bed early at around 9 o'clock so I can read for a good hour before I turn my lights out at 10 o'clock. And that's my wind down at the end of the day. And I love spending that time just sitting in my bed, immersed in a book whenever I can do that.
Yeah, perfect way to end the day and close it out and settle
Absolutely.
the mind, even if you are immersed in the story, but it's so good for that. What
Yeah.
genres do you enjoy reading?
I read almost anything except crime. I have very vivid dreams. And if I read a crime novel right before I go to bed, I end up having crazy nightmares where I scream in the middle of the night and wake up my poor husband. So, in order to keep everybody in the house sleeping peacefully, I try not to read crime at all, unless it's very mild and is more of a mystery than a sort of a very gruesome crime novel. But otherwise, I read everything from memoirs to historical fiction to contemporary or literary fiction, romance, even sometimes a little bit of dystopia. I probably don't read that much fantasy, but I do occasionally dive into that too.
Yeah. I always say on here that I feel like thrillers or the crime novels, I wish I would have a sticker like can read before bed because I
Yes.
don't have vivid dreams, but I just don't want to go to bed with that on my mind.
Yes, that is a great idea. I
Yeah.
love that.
For us that are on the slightly, it might disrupt sleep if we read something.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I'm making a campaign for that. I don't know. Well, I ask all the guests to bring three books in the form of a book flight so listeners can learn the books that you love. Can you tell us three books that you love?
Of course. So my first one is going to be Maggie O'Farrell's Portrait of a Marriage. A lot of people know Maggie O'Farrell now because of Hamlet
Yeah.
coming to our screens and being such a fabulous movie. But I also love her other novels, and Portrait of a Marriage is just incredible. It's the story. It's set several hundred years ago, and it's the story of a young Italian girl who is married off to a man she doesn't know very much about, and he wants. In fact, I think it's called The Marriage Portrait. I always get that title mixed up. He commissions an artist to paint her marriage portrait, so a portrait of her to celebrate the marriage, and it's so luscious and so descriptive, and I feel like it's Maggie at her absolute best. So that is one of
Oh,
my number one
I have to
recommendations.
read that one. I'm like, I have not, and I
Yeah,
love all things Italy. So
fabulous. Oh, yes. Well, you'd adore
Yeah.
this, 100%.
Okay, so that was,
I'm
we'll have the right title in the show notes. We'll
Yeah,
figure
it's
out
the
The
marriage
Marriage
portrait,
Portrait by
definitely. Yeah,
Maggie
I always call it
O'Farrell.
portrait of a marriage, but it's the marriage portrait.
Yes.
um, the next one I'm going to choose is Erin Morgenstern's The Night Circus, which is just a beautiful gothic tale. Again, I do love a good gothic tale
Yeah.
of two young people who are brought up to become magicians. And it's a competition to see who is going to be the best magician. And it takes place in this fantastical circus that's only open at night. And it's so deeply imaginative. I admire Erin Morgenstern's creativity and her sheer brilliance in conjuring up this world of the circus that feels so real, even though people are doing the kinds of magic tricks that, humans can't possibly
Yeah.
perform. But you never once feel like it's, a fantasy novel. It all feels completely real. And the relationships between the characters are beautiful. So that's one of my firm favorites as well.
And that was,
Um,
I feel like, such a buzzy book, yeah, a few years
oh,
ago, and for
yes.
good reason. It was
Yes.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Delicious.
Yeah. So that was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And what's the last book?
Yes. The last one I'm going to choose is Curtis Sittenfeld's romantic comedy. I love all of Curtis Sittenfeld's books as well. And it's a hard choice to choose my favorite, but I think it's that one. So it's
Okay.
about a writer for a program like Saturday Night Live. She writes the sketches that go onto the television program, and uh, a rock star comes onto the program, and they have a bit of a flirtation, and then it kind of dissipates. But then over the course of COVID, they reconnect and sort of fall into this very unusual relationship. And it's just a fabulous book about women and our kind of fears as we get a little bit older. It's about finding love again. It's very funny. All of her books are funny. So if you like something quite realist, I think that is a terrific choice with a beautiful love story in it as well.
Ooh, all right. I have not read any of her novels, so I'm excited. And I've
Oh my
seen that for
gosh,
sure. I
yes.
just have not, you know how
Yes.
it is with the TBR. It's like things come in and it's
Yeah.
constantly
As
going.
always. Yeah.
So I'll have to add this one. So Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. Thank you
Yes.
so much for bringing those books with you today. How I love to end our show is with a speed round of questions you can answer really quick. Are you a
Okay.
rereader?
Absolutely. I reread all the time.
Love it. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
Oh, definitely Jane Eyre. I read that for the first time when I was 10 years old, and it became my favorite novel instantly because it had all these grown up concepts in it that I had never come across in all of the pony books and Enid Blytons that I had read
Yeah.
up until that point.
I forgot to add when we were talking about your book that it made me want to go back and reread Jane Eyre because I read it back, I think, for school assignment. And over the
Yes.
past few years, I've been trying to revisit books that were assigned for school reading because I think we read
Mhm.
them so much differently. Well, now, A, for more life experience, but B, when it's not on assignment. I have enjoyed them
Absolutely.
so much more. So I'm like, after finishing this book, I was like, I should put Jane Eyre on my list for sometime this year.
That's so interesting that you said that. I've been touring for the book here in Australia, and lots of readers have come up to me at the end of my events and said that they intend to go and reread or read Jane Eyre. And I feel this kind of little thrill inside at my mission in life to make the whole world read Jane Eyre is coming true.
I love it. I love it. Where is your favorite place to read?
In bed, definitely. Yeah.
And lastly, what are you reading next?
I'm reading Yesteryear at the
Oh,
moment, which
yes.
is a very buzzy book at the moment. I'm only
Yeah.
about a quarter of the way through. So all I've heard is that the twist at the end is crazy. So I can't wait to get to that point so I know what everybody is talking about.
Yeah, I also have it on my holds at the library. It has not come in yet. So,
Yeah.
but I can see why, because so many people are talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Natasha Lester. Her book flight included 3 books that she loves, and you can find all the books that we talked about today at bookishflights.com. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.